Stay with me as we go through chapters 17 and 18 in the book of Revelation. But let's begin in chapter 17 and Babylon, the one world religion. Before we even start there, let's go back into the history of Babylon. Babylon is actually one of the earliest cities found in the Bible. The first time we see her is going to be in chapter 10 when we see Nimrod as her king. Continues into chapter 11, and the interesting thing is when we look at Babylon, she's not always going to be called Babylon. In fact, here she's going to be called Babel. She's going to be in the land of Shinar, which again is Babylon. So Babylon goes by many names, not just Babylon. But interestingly enough, if you look through the entire Bible, Babylon, in all her names, is the second most mentioned city in the Bible after Jerusalem. So as far as God's concerned, Babylon has a major piece to play in terms of the world's history and the world's future. Babylon was the city that first came in and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple of Jerusalem. Babylon was one of the great empires of human history. It was so great that today we look back at ancient Babylon and recognize how glorious it must have seemed. We see pieces of ancient Babylon in museums in Berlin, in London, in New York. One of the ancient wonders of the world were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. As we look at Babylon from a historical point of view, Babylon was always a major player in world history. Now, unfortunately for Babylon, they did take over the Jewish nation, though God used them for that purpose. For that, God is going to punish them. Today, if we look into Babylon, we'll notice that it's just a small village. There's nothing really going on there. It's certainly not a city. But back in the 80s and the 90s, Saddam Hussein tried to bring Babylon back to its glory. And if you look online, you'll see pictures of the temples and of certain buildings that existed. That is not the old buildings that existed. It's built on the foundations of them, but that was Saddam Hussein trying to rebuild that city. Today, that's all that's left of ancient Babylon, but because we see it in the prophecies of Revelation and also in the Old Testament prophecies, we can know that there's coming a day that Babylon will be once again a major player in the history of the world. In fact, too many people think that Babylon should be taken just symbolically, but throughout the Bible, as often as Babylon is mentioned, the second most city in the Bible is only mentioned one time symbolically in Peter. So other than that, every time Babylon is mentioned, it's used as a literal city. And there's no reason for us to not believe that just as Israel had disappeared off the face of the earth for centuries and millennia, we can recognize that Babylon will also once again appear. This will happen in the future, during that tribulation time, and maybe even before it. The world starts building up Babylon in anticipation of it becoming this great city. So when we get to chapter 17 in the book of Revelation, we're going to see Babylon, the one world religion.